And we're live. Good to have you here on the Trish Regan Show. A little later than usual, but heck, we've had quite a day of news to fill things up and change things around. My gosh, I'll tell you, the Washington Post can't get its story straight. Seems like New York Times is actually beating them to the punch. Meanwhile, oh boy, yeah, he said this. He really, really said this. Moments ago, the President of the United States commenting on Somalians and getting, how shall we say, even more politically incorrect than he normally would. Wow.
The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. Our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point.
Wow. Okay. So a controversial statement from the president. And he digs in even further. We're going to talk about all of it. Welcome to the program, everyone. I got to say, the media, they just can't get anything right. We've got the New York Times right now getting caught in this sort of attempt, or rather, I should say Washington Post getting caught by the New York Times in this kind of takedown of Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War. So you have the Department of War head, and he has his team. And apparently, according to him and according to the New York Times, not according to the Washington Post, they have a different story. We're going to get to that. But according to the New York Times, and now according to Pete, because Pete was just quoted talking about this, Hegseth ordered a lethal attack, but not the killing of survivors. So there was apparently some miscommunication along the way. And now you're in a situation where the Washington Post was saying something about the Secretary of War that the Pentagon says is not true, and the president is saying is not true. Meanwhile, Hegseth is standing by his admiral that ordered the alleged second attack, all while simultaneously, a lot of us are sort of saying, well, like if you're trying to actually, I'm not a military professional, but if you're trying to take out the enemy, right? Don't you get a second shot at doing this? Actually, Representative Crenshaw had the same comment. We'll get to him in a second. And by the way, so did ChatGPT, for what it's worth. Again, I'm not a military person, but it seems to me that if you identify an enemy and you identify a target and you maybe don't completely hit it, I don't know how it's a war crime to not go back. Anyway, at risk of sounding like I really don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the military, let's get over to at least what I do know, and that's that you gotta actually get your sourcing correct when you go with a story, Washington Post, and at least give the other side a chance to respond. Apparently they didn't do either. Here we go.
On Thanksgiving evening with a 3-hour deadline, and they still published it anyway. It's disgraceful, but thankfully the American people see through it.
I hope the American people see through it. So here's the deal. We've been talking about fake media a lot, fake news a lot. The administration now actually has an entire site devoted to fake news where they're calling out who's the worst of the worst. And it looks like the Washington Post this week is going to get the honors. Again, the New York Times this morning correcting the record, and then Pete Hegseth in the cabinet meeting correcting it, saying, look, he didn't authorize the strike, but he stands by his man. And he said a similar thing, of course, on Twitter. And some people are saying, oh, he's trying to bury the guy who actually did this. I'll tell you, it's sort of weird how this story has taken on a life of its own, especially after the Seditious Six, as the president labeled them. It kind of feels, dare I say, a little bit manufactured. Yeah, like a lot manufactured. Anyway, here is, let me show you the Fox report on this whole Hegseth controversy. The controversy that really isn't there, because I would think that, one, the president can order a strike. Oh, by the way, don't take my word for it. Even MSNBC had to come to that conclusion the other day on Morning Joe. Military professionals would tell you exactly the same, and I don't really know why the second strike would be any different than the first. Anyway, here is a Fox report on what the White House was saying in response to this now infamous Washington Post story.
Trump administration says it did not break any laws after carrying out an airstrike on a boat 3 months ago today. The strike was notable, though, because it was multiple shots that were fired by the military, killing 2 people who appeared to have survived the first strike. And now Democrats say they need to know if war crimes were committed.
The question in front of us, and I believe there will be bipartisan investigations in both the House and in the Senate, in order to determine whether war crimes were committed and either U.S. law or international law or both were violated.
The White House is denying that any international law was broken. They are also saying that Secretary Hegseth did not give that second order to kill those people that had survived that strike. Instead, it was an admiral who carried out that attack.
Yeah, okay. So there's something else along the way, right? As you heard me say, this feels as though this is all getting somewhat manufactured. Well, that is certainly a position that I think the administration would take and has taken. And as a result now, there's lots of talk of Senator Kelly getting court-martialed. Now, what do we mean by that? It looks like he might be in a little more trouble than perhaps he would have ever anticipated. Senator Mark Kelly possibly getting charged here, possibly facing charges. We know that an investigation is underway. That was actually clarified late last week, and now there's this.
Clear. So if Secretary Phelan were to recommend court-martial, that would be on the board?
What was the question? Sorry.
If Secretary Phelan were to recommend court-martial, that could be an option on the table?
All options are on the table at this moment in time, and we look forward to getting the Secretary of the Navy's review. And the Secretary of War has been very clear in his statements as well that he takes this extremely seriously, and it is unacceptable.
Unacceptable. Okay, so she's saying they're conducting an investigation, and it looks like possibly court-martialing him is on the table. I mean, they're not too happy because he's been like all over the airwaves over the weekend, all throughout, saying all kinds of stuff, while simultaneously actually coming out and admitting that that's, videotapes that they made for social media, the one I'm talking about, the one that the White House has labeled as fake news. Well, they didn't have anything on the president at the time. They didn't think he had necessarily done anything illegal. They just decided to kind of go with it on this hunch that maybe what if he did. We've never actually been there in history, guys. Like, this is really unusual territory. Not even during the Civil War did you have one side sort of trying to anticipate what the next would do and attacking preemptively. This is getting kind of weird. Here's Senator Mark Kelly on that CNN show by that guy who's a real fickle little reporter, remember? He's the one who wants to tell you it's the media's fault that they didn't figure out Joe Biden actually had a decline in mental health. I'm talking about Jake Tapper. Watch.
So first of all, they confirmed the double tap strike today, the White House, even though 2 days ago, Sean Parnell at the Pentagon was saying the entire story was fabricated, made up out of whole cloth, he said. It seems as though they are saying that Hegseth gave the order to kill everyone on board, a lethal strike, and that Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley was in charge. He's the head of special forces.
Okay, come on,
and that
spit it out,
he is the one that gave the order for the second strike, the double tap on the whatever survivors there were. Who is ultimately responsible if there is something wrong with the double tap strike, with the second strike?
Well, Jake, I think it's going to be really important for my committee, the Armed Services Committee that I sit on, the same thing in the House, to get these people in the room and get testimony from them under oath, maybe part of it in a SCIF and in a secure facility and part of it publicly, to get what the exact real story is. I think this is what happens when you put an incompetent individual in perhaps the second most important job in our country, the Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth had no business being nominated. Republicans in the Senate should not have confirmed him. And He's been there for less than a year now, maybe 7 or 8 months, and this is the result of incompetence at the highest level. Here's a guy runs around on a stage talking about lethality, warrior ethos, killing people. The president even echoes that. We're going to kill people. We're good at this in the military. We have the most professional and capable military this planet has ever seen. But when you have leadership that speaks in those terms, that aren't talking about the things that really matter, like training, what kind of combat power do we have? How do we make our military more efficient and effective? And talking about, like, what are the laws? The law does matter.
Well, you tell me, because you fired upon boats in the Gulf War, right? I mean, as a Navy commander.
I sunk 2 ships.
You sunk 2 ships. Are you allowed, once the ship starts sinking and there are survivors, I mean, the Washington Post says they were clinging to the wreckage, but whatever, there are survivors, we know there were survivors. Are you allowed to then attack the survivors?
Absolutely not. I sunk a OSA-2 missile patrol boat. It was in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m., with 2 cluster munitions in Kuwait Harbor. And then we left. We were, out a Polnokny troop carrier in the Persian Gulf during the day getting shot at there were 2 ships. One of them was shooting at us. No, you don't do that. Everybody knows that. That is against the Geneva Conventions. That's against the laws of war, which we should always be abiding by. We're the United States of America. We are not Russia. We're not Iraq. We're not Iran. We have to hold our people to a higher standard.
Wow.
This is really serious.
Whoa. Okay. So there's Mark Kelly saying basically we are the equivalent of Iran? Excuse me, or Russia? Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm sorry. Hang on. Do you remember, because I remember when we were trying to pull out of Afghanistan, it turns out that Joe Biden's team actually went after the wrong people? Like, they actually had a drone strike on a van and killed some innocent people. What's going on here? Meanwhile, they'll tell you. I get it. Yeah, they'll tell you. Well, in this particular case, we're not actually at war. Therefore, they can't actually, they're not authorized to have these strikes to begin with, right? Let alone a secondary strike. You're not allowed to do the first strike. Okay, guys. Since when was that the case? Because I think Obama actually launched some strikes. I think that we had Biden launch strikes. In fact, Clinton launched strikes. Like, when did it suddenly become that we're going to go and ask the Democrats' approval? I mean, it's just, if they happen to like the particular strike, I remember them out there signing actually drones that were going to hit Russia when, they were gung-ho with Zelensky. They did that, okay? So that was their war. But if the president is fighting to actually keep what he and his intelligence community believes is a dangerous threat to the U.S., a drug peddling ship from coming into the U.S., he's not allowed to take them out because they make the decision. I'm not sure that all adds up. Meanwhile, you can't go back for a second strike. No second strike allowed. Well, Dan Crenshaw doesn't really have much use for that argument. Watch.
I can't recall any time in my history doing counterterrorism operations where we strike a group, whether that's a building or a boat or a vehicle, and then we were like, oh, well, they're survivors. We have to go. We can't kill them. Of course we kill them.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, he's a former Navy SEAL. So when I said, if I don't know a thing or two of the military, it's because I actually have no formal training in that whatsoever. I just have what you might call common sense. And my common sense would tell me, if you've identified a target, like, you don't take out the target and you have another opportunity to take it out, then wouldn't you be able to do that? But, I'll deflect, as I said, to Crenshaw, who's a former U.S. Navy SEAL. Mark Kelly, however, because he is such a political animal, and let's be honest, like, these people have weaponized intelligence. That's what's happened. I mean, really going back to the Obama days, right? And going back to Hillary Clinton and the Russia dossier. And then, of course, everything that followed, they weaponized intelligence. And they're trying to do it again. And now they're trying to actually divide and conquer in the military. And I think we all have a real problem with that. And that's getting into really, dare I say, seditious, right? Kinds of stuff. And this is now becoming a political war, so to speak, and the Republicans are not fully united. And so now you have some Republican senators calling for Mark Kelly's side of things, calling for people to have an investigation into Hegseth on this. I want to go to some sound about what the White House's reaction is to that very issue right now.
Democrat side is Senator Mark Kelly. Now, we heard some reporting about a possible investigation into him regarding his status as a retired member of the United States Navy, still on pension, and therefore still under the jurisdiction of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And as such, his membership, you mentioned the Seditious Six, would that be grounds for possibly bringing him back to active service for an investigation, for NJP, or even a full court-martial?
So you're correct. The Department of War received serious allegations of misconduct against Senator Mark Kelly, and in accordance with the Uniform Code of Military Justice and other applicable recommendations and regulations, we're doing a thorough review of all of these allegations. And the Secretary of War has tasked the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, with doing a thorough review, looking into all of these allegations and providing him an update on December 10th. So we will have more information to come on that.
So December 10th is sort of the day you should be watching for. I think what's fascinating here, though, again, is this attempt to try and get at something, right? They were trying to basically solve for something in this particular case. And that's been pretty evident, I think, right from the beginning, ever since we first saw that tape. And we don't have to play it again, but you know which one I'm talking about. And now we're in a situation where you've got all of these people that are coming out of the woodwork trying to attack not just Donald Trump, but now they feel like they have, they've got something with Hegseth. And again, I just go back to what Crenshaw said. I go back to sort of common sense reality. If you've identified a target, wouldn't you be able to then continue going after them? It sort of would be beyond reason to think you couldn't. Here's a representative saying it.
I'm confident that the admiral thought he was carrying out his mission.
But why is it questionable to order a strike to kill individuals who are survivors?
These are terrorists. Okay, these are.
Whoa. Okay, so forgive me. This is a different soundbite than the one I thought. But this is what the left is saying. Okay, so the left is out there trying to allege that somehow now, did they use the T word? I think he did. I think he used the T word. Yeah. Now, we're the terrorists. I mean, I'm sorry. You guys are on another planet at this point. You have people that are bringing really illicit material to the United States of America that endangers the lives of all Americans. And the president has made this his mandate to take these boats out and to not allow for any crossing of this illicit material. And what do? You now call us the bad guys? We're the bad guys here. How are we the bad guys? For goodness sakes, now Pete Hegseth, you're using the T word on? Whoa.
Absolute terrorists.
But
I didn't see this kind of scrutiny when the Obama administration was launching drone strikes against terrorist organizations in the Middle East. That happened all.
Okay, so wait a second. It was the soundbite, I thought he was trying to say. I thought, okay, this is live TV. Ladies and gentlemen, I am mistaken. So this representative is making the point, of course, that we had to take these guys out. I thought that because, anything could happen. They could use the T word on Pete Hegseth, for goodness sakes. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. I mean, you wait for it because of what Donald Trump said about Somalians. I mean, I'm just waiting for the left to go bonkers on that one. They're going to have a field day, of course. But, he's owning it. He's just embracing it. He's like, you know what? This is what I think, and I don't care if it's politically incorrect, but this is what we're doing. And everybody's really freaking out. So let's hear the rest. I think that basically what we've just learned in this particular tape, and again, I want to play the entire soundbite. I'm actually listening to it with you for the first time here. Wolf is going to have his, handed to him.
Time, okay? And so, I didn't see this kind of scrutiny about the survivors, et cetera. These are terrorists. They're bringing poison into the United States. They have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. And we need to understand that. Killed far more Americans than Al-Qaeda or
so let me just be precise with you,
ever did.
Congressman.
And so I have no problem with the kinetic strikes that are happening in the Caribbean, killing and destroying the drugs that are killing American citizens and have been killing American citizens for years.
Okay, well, that makes sense to me, right? And this also makes sense to me. If you don't get them on the first time, why wouldn't you have a shot the second time?
I can't recall any time in my history doing counterterrorism operations where we strike a group, whether that's a building or a boat or a vehicle, and then we were like, oh, well, there's survivors. We have to go. We can't kill them. Of course we kill them.
Okay, and that's a former Navy SEAL, now U.S. Congressman speaking. So I think that Mark Kelly here is going to be in a little bit of trouble as this moves forward, in part because, Mark Kelly, are you kidding me? You actually said this. It's like you're trying to perjure yourself. I mean, you know the tape, right? That, oh, they're going on and on. You don't have to do what you're being told to do, because guess what? If you do, we might go after you when we come back into power. Ha ha ha, dun dun dun, midterms. Or when we take back the Oval Office, or we take back the House and the Senate, we're going to come after you. That's what you're threatening our armed services with right before Thanksgiving, for goodness sakes. You do understand the problem with this, ladies and gentlemen, right? Because there's a chain of command in the military. And certainly, obviously, you shouldn't be following illegal orders, and you have every right to defend yourself against it. That's why they have the JAG program. My dad was part of it, by the way, in Vietnam. Okay? DeSantis as well was part of that JAG program, right? You have legal defense that can help you. But why would you come out with a video trying to warn everybody in the military, oh, you shouldn't be following orders? You're trying to politicize the military, and what did you have to go on? So now they're asking Senator Kelly, they're asking him, hey, what did you have to go on? Did you know that this had happened? Did you know that Pete Hegseth had told his admiral to go ahead and do a second strike, which actually now we're learning Pete didn't in fact do? But, a military professional is like, okay, I'm supposed to take out the boat. Let's make sure we take him out. And Mark Kelly is out there. Are you kidding me saying this? Watch.
Sort of flimsy legality that was being offered during the briefings. Were these sort of strikes that are now in the news what you were making reference to when you posted that video telling members of the military that they needed to feel okay just obeying orders that they felt were illegal?
Based on who this president is and who the Secretary of Defense is, and specifically things that the president has said in the past and things he was talking about doing in the future. Let me give you an example. 2016, he's talking about something on a debate stage that was clearly illegal. And he was reminded by Brett Baer from Fox News.
Okay, the question was, sir, did you have any information? And he tells us he's going back to, was it 2016 on the debate stage? Are you kidding me? Again, the question is, did you have any information? And, she's obviously not enough reporter to I have no patience with these people. Honestly, I would have cut them off midstream because I'm like, answer my question. Don't give me a whole litany of history going all the way back in time. Here we are.
That would be an illegal order. Military won't do that. You know what the president's response was to that? The military will not refuse my orders. Implying that even if they are illegal, they will not refuse them. He's also talked about shooting protesters in the legs. Then he's talking about deploying more troops to American cities and using those cities as training grounds. Do you know what that means? That means using the American people for the military to train on.
No, it doesn't entirely mean that, by the way. It might mean actually trying to straighten up some cities. By the way, D.C. is very, very thankful because they now have a murder rate that is lower than it's been in years. Imagine that. Maybe you could actually help train, dare I say, even police forces. What have I said forever? You put all this training into the military and it works really, really, really well. Maybe you could impart some of that training. I've said this for a long time, especially during the whole BLM crisis, et cetera, and after everything we went through in summer of 2020. Maybe the answer is you actually need to arm our police with more help, right? More and more help and training similar to what you'd get in the military. And I bet you back then, well, we know they don't want any military. They don't want any police. But back then we could have used, right, a little bit of those military members with their savviness to help manage a really challenging and still challenging time. And so they can't stand this, and they're working themselves, prepping for something that isn't here yet. And then when the media hands them something, that they think is raw meat, they just try and go for the jugular.
So we were looking forward to try to head something off at the pass.
Oh, you were? I see.
That could have been really, really bad. So it wasn't about this specific thing.
It wasn't about this specific thing, okay? Just so we're all clear on that. They just thought at some point he'll do something illegal. So at some point, this story will make sense. Well, I've told you forever, they're going to fire all the ladies on The View. So at some point, I will be right. But I'm a member of the media, okay? Like, I get to opine on things. They actually have to take things like military really, really, really seriously. By the way, it's freezing in here. It's absolutely freezing. I might have to just put this sweater on in just a moment. We're doing some work in the studio behind the scenes, so they had to turn the heat off for a couple hours today, which is why I'm a little bit later than usual coming to you. And I am frozen, but you know how committed I am to all of this and to exposing the nonsense, right? The Washington Post is having their story shut down. You get the media creating a fake narrative through and with the help of the quote-unquote seditious six, because they're the ones that, basically tried to prepare everyone for this. And I think it's because the loyalists to Biden and to Barack Obama are really worried that they're going to pay the price, right? You got Brennan out there, you got Comey, for goodness sakes. Oh, by the way, he's not off the hook yet. New news about what I told you would be coming, and that's indictment number 2 on the way. Oh, for both Letitia and for Comey. We'll talk about that one coming up. But I will say this, Donald Trump is outdoing himself here today. You want to talk politically incorrect? I'm going to give you politically incorrect, okay? Like, he's had it. He's absolutely positively had it. And you know how everybody talks about him? Like, you kind of like him because he's sort of endearing and he's like that crazy uncle at Thanksgiving that will say things that everybody's thinking but nobody dares to say. Well, he goes out and he just says it. So here's the new whopper for you. Everybody, prepare yourself because Rachel Maddow and company are going to come with the arrows out, right? Like, he's just like past the point of no return now. I mean, amazing that he said these things. I understand people would be critical because yes, you can't label entire groups this way, but don't forget what this is a genesis out of. A $1 billion alleged fraud that Tim Walz oversaw that was being orchestrated and run by many members of the Somalian community. And so now he's calling Tim Walz out, he's calling the Somalian community out, and he's doing it in a way that, let's just say, is not going to win him any friends on MSNBC.
And they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country is no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too.
So
we don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. Our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other.
Sweden was at a tipping point. I've said that Ireland's kind of at a tipping point, certainly in Northern Ireland, because the British are letting everyone that, they don't want in. These things are very controversial, obviously, because we are a nation of immigrants. I get it. But he's looking at what just went down in Minnesota, and he's not too happy. I mean, you had him at Ilhan Omar, shall we say. Let's continue.
And we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Oh. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage.
Oh.
These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. They came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain, and do nothing but bitch, we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
My goodness.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Mr. President, has the Bureau offered to leave?
Okay, I'm going to go out to the comments. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I don't want to see what you guys are saying. Look, I mean, again, you know, I want to be cautious because those were some statements. Let me just say, maybe he just changed the news cycle off of Hegseth, like single-handedly, right? Like he's very good at that. If you want to like steer things in a different way. Yeah, Donald Trump, you just did it. Look, you guys are super supportive of him, and I, you know, look, I mean, who's willing to say that kind of stuff nowadays, right? I mean, I always liked All in the Family and Archie Bunker, and he was a very lovable kind of character, right? But he'd say these things. Remember that show? I used to watch it as a kid, you know, with the son-in-law, and he was always mad, the hippie. And there's a little bit of sort of that mentality going on that people are really and truly going to attack. But maybe that's, you know, the plan in a way, because he knows it's politically incorrect, but he's deliberately choosing to say it anyway. And I suspect part of the reason for that is he's so, I'm going to use the word frickin', the New Englander in me. You'd think I'd be a little more fine with the cold studio today, given my live for or die cold New Hampshire roots. Anyway, given that, you know, he knows sort of how to maneuver in these situations, and he's never quite said anything like that before, like they're garbage. He's never called Ilhan Omar garbage before. He's doing that and saying, I know it's politically incorrect of me to do this, so why is he doing it now? Thank you, Peace of My Mind. It was Archie and Meathead. Exactly. Good one. Okay, so why would he do this now? Why would he do this today on a moment like this? I think he's really getting annoyed. All right, we're going to keep it clean. All right. See, I know where you can go and where you can't go too. And he knows you can't really go there, and he just went there. So why do this now? Why do this today? I think he really was angry about the Hegseth stuff. Now, people said to me over the last couple of days, oh, Hegseth is going down, you know, he's going to be out. And I'm like, yeah, you guys tried that, right? You're trying to take Cash down, trying to take Hegseth down. Pete's not going anywhere. The president really, really likes him, and the president really trusts him. And Pete has been there in the trenches with the president since 2016, okay? Pete has been a loyal supporter, and the president trusts Pete Hegseth. So, you know, whether you want to debate whether it was your perfect choice for Treasury Secretary, I'm so used to saying that. See, I really am a business reporter. Anyway, if it really was your choice for Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense, you know, you could say, he's just a TV guy. I would remind you that he's a TV guy who does have a military background and who the president really respects and likes. And so they're trying to take out his guy. They may as well be trying to take himself out. They may as well try and take Trump out, because if you had gotten Pete and you're able to take out the Secretary of War and say, okay, somehow you're not allowed to go and do a second strike, you're not allowed to do a strike to begin with. I mean, you're basically decapitating the entire administration at that point. You're getting rid of any power that Donald Trump would have. So he was taking this very seriously. And I think, knowing him and knowing how savvy he is from a media perspective, right? He wouldn't say that unless he really was trying to flip the story on its head. And that's where we are right now, because he's so sick of these bozos trying to get in the way of him trying to help the nation, frankly, that he had to do something drastic to get them to talk about something else, because really, honestly, a lot of the heat should be on one Tim Walz right about now. And I think this investigation that has just been launched into Tim Walz's willingness, shall we say, alleged willingness to overlook what this Somalian immigrant ring in Minnesota was doing. The fact that Tim Walz, under his watch, was somehow allowing for this, that it happened, is now being called into question in real time. I want to go to Caroline Leavitt at the White House saying basically, yeah, this is on the table.
Safety of law-abiding American citizens. In fact, according to a new bombshell report from the New York Times, Somalian migrants in Minnesota have defrauded nearly $1 billion in taxpayer-funded benefits under Democrat Governor Walz's leadership. President Trump is putting an end to this dangerous America Last approach. His position is rooted in common sense. In the wake of last week's atrocity.
Wow. So it's sort of insane when you think about it. And again, you know, the guy who committed that horror in D.C., killing a member of our National Guard, was an Afghan, quote unquote, refugee, right? They brought him here after he had worked with our military and CIA overseas in Afghanistan. He came here and then did that. So the president's tolerance level right now is very, very, very thin. If he had little tolerance before, he definitely has no tolerance now, and has no use for a group of people that he believes to be a threat, right? This is the, you know, whether you came here from Afghanistan or Somalia, now, you know, he's learning that Tim Walz basically oversaw this billion-dollar fraud. By the way, he has no excuse for this. He seems to think that he did the right thing. Let's take a listen.
Well, speaking of the Somali community, President Trump is targeting them and your state in part. He's citing fraud as the reason for his crackdown. Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. As you know, Governor, that is more than Minnesota spends each year to run its Department of Corrections. So I want to give you a chance to respond to this. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts
really, really well run. I wonder what that bond rating's doing these days.
Criminals. There's a reason Minnesota ranks as the top, lowest childhood poverty, best place for children to live.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he had no answer. Guys, you want to know what went down in this. I mean, this is unbelievable. The New York Times was the first to really make a big deal out of this story, although I would say that DHS in Minnesota had been calling attention to this for some time. How fraud swamped Minnesota's social services system on Tim Walz's watch. Prosecutors say members of the Somali diaspora, a group of people with growing political power. Okay, so now we have to worry about just exactly what kind of political power. And was Tim Walz afraid of them? Was this no-go for Timmy? I could have some fun here, but I'll leave the tampon stuff aside. President Trump has drawn national attention to the scandal amid his crackdown on immigration. They're writing, well, they're also calling attention to it because this is pretty amazing, right? Like, this is a big, big deal. They had all this money thanks to, the COVID-19 pandemic and all the programs, and all of a sudden you had all these abuses because you had something that was a one-time health emergency suddenly turn into a pandemic of abuses. How about that? I mean, you wonder why the Republicans were holding out, because they did not want all that additional health care spending, which they claimed was going to wind up going to states like Minnesota so you could do more of this, right? More funny business. I mean, the funny business, that's got to end, and that cannot be allowed. And so, yes, Donald Trump has had it with a lot of things right about now, including the Somalians in the state of Minnesota that were allegedly scheming the system, right? Generous safety net programs, they write. All of that came to light state and federal officials suddenly began to grapple with jarring reality. The jarring reality that it was basically like a giant piggy bank. According to the New York Times, over the last 5 years, you have enforcement officials saying that the Somalian community in Minnesota made, quote, small fortunes by setting up companies that build state agencies for millions of dollars worth of social services that were never provided, right? They came to Minnesota, they're like, woohoo, free stuff, free stuff. Oh, and now, allegedly, some of them decided to take more than just the free stuff. They decided to come up with like big plots. And now, I should add, it is being investigated as a possible terror concern. So there are fears that some of this money not only went to enrich the lifestyles of some of the people accused of doing all this, but actually went to fund some pretty illicit, heinous, gross stuff. Okay, so that's part of the fear here. Federal prosecutors say 59 people have been convicted in those schemes so far. More than $1 billion in taxpayers' money has been stolen in 3 plots that they were investigating. That is more than Minnesota spends annually to run its Department of Corrections. So, you spend all this money on fraud. Life is good for some people, and then they become more and more powerful, apparently, in the state of Minnesota, so much that some believe that Tim Walz may have been influenced. I mean, Tim Walz, remember Timmy? Because forget the tampon stuff. Remember the flag? He was so proud of how he changed the flag to one that, gosh darn it, looks a lot like Somalia's flag. We did that story. It's on my shorts feed. We may need to resurrect that. Anyway, there's a lot of outrage right now. People are really concerned because you can't actually commit fraud. And what was it but a giant candy store? They were handing out cash like there was no tomorrow. Right? That's what came out of the COVID thing. In an effort to try and do something that was helpful for people during an emergency situation, they kept it going and going and going and going. And Biden came in and kept going and going and going and going. He gave out the 3rd check, don't forget. And then they had all this money that they could put into healthcare and education and this, that, and the other. And before you know it, people were cashing in. And now they say, well, they have to look into this because according to the president, and he's weighed in on this, there's a thing called fraudulent money laundering activity that may be coming out of Minnesota. And that, he said apparently that the Somalian perpetrators should be sent back to where they came from. And then he doubled down on it in the video that I just showed you. But why not watch it? Just a quick moment. Again, if you're just joining us here on the Trish Regan Show, the President of the United States really just going on the attack with Somalian immigrants here in the USA.
And they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage.
Oh my goodness.
These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain, and do nothing but bitch.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I forgot that.
Let them go back to where they came from and fix it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh my gosh. So, you know where he stands. Tim Walz acts like there's nothing wrong, but, Donald Trump says there's a reason for that. And he got himself in a little bit of trouble with this one, but I think that this may pale in comparison to what Ilhan Omar is going to say in response to what we just heard.
All right. Memorize a very...
Governor Walz asked you to release the...
Will you tell us what it was for?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So I'm just reading some of your comments. This is, you guys, I think you're with them on this one. Look, again, it's not stuff that we normally say, right? Because, by the way, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And for the most part, he does, but he's just had it at this point. And I think it all goes back to, some of the Arctic frost stuff. I think it goes back to what we've been talking about all week. Gosh, it's only Tuesday. It's only Tuesday. It feels like all week. Because we've had them try and take out Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Oh, that was yesterday. And then last night into today was Pete Hegseth. And it's all because why? I mean, honestly, I love Pam, but Pam's the one that let the ball drop on Comey there, right? The statute of limitations. They waited too long to get rid of Eric Siebert. And then Lindsay came in. She had only basically 8 days to come up with a new plan. And so there are reasons why you might not, if you're on the right, necessarily want someone running the DOJ like that. But if you're on the left, you're like, yeah, I'll take that all day long, because she's going to have little things like forgetting to turn in the homework screw her up on the way to the forum, right? If anything happened on the way to the forum, it turns out like the expiration date came and went on Comey. And I know they're coming back at it, and we'll talk about that, because I think that you could come at this a different way, probably not in the appeals court, and we can discuss why, but they're coming up with a second indictment. The reality is they've tried to take out now, in 2 days' time, like in 48 hours, they're trying to get rid of Hegseth. They're trying to get rid of Kash Patel. And I'll tell you this, the right is trying to get rid of Mark Kelly, because all of those people that came out saying everything that they said, the quote unquote seditious six, trying to drive a wedge right in the middle of our military right before the holidays, they're the ones that are really and truly under scrutiny right about now. I mean, this is getting wild. I mean, concerns about whether or not there was links to terror funding. I mean, this is pretty bad. And I mentioned this knowing I'm going to tell you about Letitia James in just a moment. Letitia James, was she another one? I'm just going to ask you, did she overlook certain things like Waltz overlooked certain things because her office was informed of some money laundering efforts that were going on? We had sanctions in place against Iran, against Russia, and yet the sanctions were kind of just glossed over by the New York Attorney General. How could that be? And this one, I mean, Merrick Garland has called it the country's largest pandemic relief fraud scheme. See, the scheme going on in the state of Minnesota underneath the guy that could have become our vice president. That's how crazy this is. And Kamala Harris, with everything that she should have known in terms of any due diligence that they could have done, like real due diligence, not fake due diligence, fake stuff like the dossier, right? If you'd done any due diligence on Timmy, you might have come up with this, because everybody knew about it. They just weren't actually, bothering to care about any of it. Which is crazy, right? I mean, you've got all kinds of stuff going on. Meanwhile, the president also saying today that, this affordability crisis might just be a bunch of nonsense. That, if you look at inflation, for goodness sakes, it's not what it was. It's actually come back into check. And so, yes, he wants the Fed to move on interest rates, et cetera. But in terms of the actual affordability and inflation levels, maybe that's just a pipe dream to nowhere. I will tell you, it may be a pipe dream to nowhere on some things, and we'll look at some inflation numbers. But when it comes to drug prices, for goodness sakes, I mean, when it comes to healthcare, I know, it's out of control, right? Because Big Pharma is always got its hand out. Big Pharma wants it all. And you look at the increase in drug prices, and it tells the entire story. So, whether there's an affordability crisis, we'll talk about that in just a moment, because there's a lot of things you can get cheaper in the USA than you ever could before. And we kind of, we have a lot of cheap stuff from China, shall we say. We could use a little less cheap stuff from China. But I'll tell you what we don't need: higher costs for drug prices. You got Big Pharma out there. They got a huge lobby, right? Army of lobbyists that are working overtime to keep Americans paying the highest prescription drug prices in the world. They've already hiked prices on hundreds of medicines this year, while flooding us with billions of dollars worth of misleading ads. You know, they loved it. I don't know what the nightly news is going to do if these guys aren't advertising on their shows, for goodness sakes, because there's so many things that, you know, you never thought you needed, never thought you had, that they're trying to target you for. So I'll tell you, big pharma is a problem. They're pushing their agenda. And while, you know, what, I get it, you know, you have protection of speech, whatever, I would say it's gotten a little bit out of control. Just a little teeny tiny bit out of control. Their goal in Washington, as you know, is pretty simple: escape accountability, block free market competition, and jack up outrageous prices. More profits for them, more government intrusion for you, higher costs for you, your family, for small businesses. And this is why I've teamed with conservatives for lower healthcare costs to warn everyone about the big pharma agenda and what it's going to mean for Americans and employers with billions in higher premiums and drug costs. This is serious. You know that the president's not going to back down on this. His administration is cracking down on drug companies that gouge Americans and mislead patients with all their obnoxious advertising. Meanwhile, conservatives in Congress are introducing reforms to stop big pharma's games that block generics and keep prices so high. So join us here in rejecting big pharma's agenda. Go over and visit, I think I put it on the screen for you, pharmawindfall.com. Help us in terms of lowering drug prices, right? I'm so proud to partner with these guys on this effort, because this is important stuff. One of our great advertisers, conservatives for lower healthcare costs, pharmawindfall.com. So this issue of affordability, as we just got into, this is very, very, very interesting because I should point out, things seem expensive because we had 4 years of prices going up, 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 and away. And now, you know, you get inflation kind of leveling out in that 2 to 3% zone. And that's actually really good. And that's where the Federal Reserve, whether you like it or not, always shoots, right? Because they don't want things to depreciate. If things depreciate, then you're never going to go and buy anything. It's like, you know, waiting for the big sale all the time. Well, why am I going to buy that today when I can buy it next month and it will be cheaper? And so that creates other problems in the economy. So you can't really have that. You got to be like looking at a little bit of inflation, not a lot, but a little bit of inflation. We had a lot of inflation under Joe Biden, let's face it. And granted, President Trump's in the seat now, and people like have this idea that somehow prices are going to go back to where they were. Well, that's kind of a fable. That can't really happen. I want to go to my friend Steve Moore, who's speaking on a network I used to work for, Fox Business, this morning about this very issue. Steve is very, very smart. He's an excellent economist, and he's explaining sort of what I'm telling you here, but he does a better job. Let's watch.
I want to pull up a chart that you provided, Steve, and it shows real household income has increased across all income levels under President Trump. This is good news. So why does it not feel like this when we show polling where Americans are saying we are in an affordability crisis?
So, you know, the first term of Trump, which you're looking at there on the chart, saw enormous gains in income, and especially look at that compared to what happened under Biden, the blue bars. I mean, so Trump families saw a big increase in their incomes under Trump. And by the way, that doesn't even include the value of their 401k plans that went up very considerably, both in Trump's first term and so far in his second term. So far in the first 10 months of this year, the median family income is up by about $1,200. That's after inflation, Lauren. So that means that their wages and salaries have gone up faster than inflation. So to some extent, this affordability crisis is a mythology. People can afford more. And incidentally, we know that, Lauren, because look at what's happening with the amount of money people are spending. Look what happened on Black Friday with the 10% hit. If people don't have the money, how can they go out and be spending this kind of money on Christmas presents? So I think to some extent, there's an exaggerated affordability crisis. Now,
very interesting. Okay. So I don't disagree with Steve on that. Let's face it, right? Like, we actually have a really, really, really good situation here with a level of affordability that is really unrivaled elsewhere in the world, right? We can buy cheap stuff from China. We can buy cheap stuff from China all day long and then go around and buy some more. And so is it really affordability, or is it actually just that we have really good memories, right, of the way things were? And that's what's sort of tough, because, you know, I book a vacation these days and it's like, you got to be kidding me. How much? How much is the hotel room? And I'm like, what the heck happened? Well, you see, hotel prices went up because nobody built during COVID. Remember that, ma'am, dummy, socialist that you are, you want to basically restrict the housing sector in New York and gouge everyone and not allow for any new development because who the heck is going to build there? No developer would build there under the restrictions that you're trying to come up with. Well, think about the restrictions during COVID. You absolutely couldn't build there anywhere because everything was shut down. So what did that do? It meant no new supply coming onto the market, no new hotels coming onto the market, et cetera. Consequently, I look at hotel prices today and they don't have enough. I mean, there's some other reasons, by the way, if you look at what Vance was saying today. He's blaming the Somalians, effectively. Yeah, he basically said you have this huge number of migrants coming to the US of A, and because we have this huge popularity influx and we have all these handouts, right? These people have actually taken a lot of the housing that otherwise would go to others. And so that's one of the reasons in his estimation why you have such high housing prices. But let's go to the president on this issue. And I say it again, let's go to the president on this issue.
Our prices now for energy, but for gasoline are really low. Electricity's coming down. And when that comes down, everything comes down. But the word affordability is a Democrat scam. They say it, and then they go on to the next subject. And everyone thinks, oh, they had lower prices. No, they had the worst inflation in the history of our country.
That's right.
Now, some people will correct me, because they always love to correct me, even though I'm right about everything. But some people like to correct me, and they say 48 years. I say it's not 48 years, it's much more. But they say it's the worst inflation that we've had in 48 years. I say ever. But whether it's 48 years or ever, it's pretty bad. We had the worst inflation that we've ever had. Since last January, we've stopped inflation in its tracks. And there is still more to do. There's always more to do, but we have it down to a very good level.
Wow. Our thanks to the Post for that one, that little soundbite coming out of today's cabinet meeting. Look, I think that he's darn right on the inflation stuff. It's come down to an acceptable level. And that's a really, really, really important thing, okay? It's really important. Everything that's happening right now, really and truly, is so important, you guys, and I can't underscore that enough because we're coming up on some really high stakes with midterms fast around the corner. And when I say high stakes, what I mean is, cancel culture on steroids. To think what they were saying, the Seditious Six, right, with the tape, and then going out onto the Sunday shows and basically saying, hey, we're going to come after you. We're going to come after the military if you follow these orders that we don't agree with. You don't agree with them? Wow. Okay, so why didn't anybody go after Clinton, Obama, Biden? It's only if you say it's okay. I don't think so. Anyway, just keep that in mind because not only can they go after military members, they can go after your bank, the place where you keep your money, and that would be kind of a problem, right? Donald Trump is trying to take some steps right now to undo some of what they did, but you had politically motivated regulators that were leading to the closure of Americans' bank accounts. And believe me, if they had their way, they would have been in there even more. Remember Janet Yellen saying anybody who makes more than $600, has more than $600 in transactions a year was fair game? It was like, whoa, what are you doing? That's how you're going to go after billionaires evading taxes. Great. You're going to go after the $600 bank accounts. Well, anyway, the president had a recent executive order that was designed to stop politically motivated debanking and ensure fair access to banking for Americans nationwide. And this is important. Americans for Free Markets, who I've teamed up with on this effort, is thanking President Trump for his commitment to preventing government-driven debanking, urging Congress and regulators to build on this momentum by enacting lasting, meaningful reform, right? That's what we need. Congress should be working with the administration, if you would, to fix outdated laws, increase transparency and accountability in financial regulation so future lawmakers don't try and go back and weaponize the system for financial gain. Having regulators go in there and tell, we don't like her, we don't like him, We don't like her. And the regulators are then forcing the closure of bank accounts. They get to have that kind of power? I'm sorry, I don't think so. Lawmakers should also establish a national standard prohibiting any financial institution from denying services based on politics or religion to protect the financial freedom of American people. I want you to go to Americans for Free Markets, or actually you should go to Free Markets, freemarkets.org. This is sponsored in part from Americans for Free Markets. We're calling on Congress here to advance these critical reforms, strengthen President Trump's leadership on fair access to financial services, for goodness sakes. Like, this can't happen again, but I'll tell you, they can't win again, right? So this is part of the effort for freemarkets.org, because if, look, now I don't want to sound like them, for goodness sakes, but, how many times did we have to hear them say, if they win, then look what's going to happen. If Donald Trump wins, look what's going to happen. Well, another little story to tell you about here today. Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas, they're not too happy with CNN right now. You think you're the only one who doesn't like CNN. Well, now these two don't really like CNN because their son, who happens to have a podcast, who knew? Everybody's got a podcast. We have the best one right here. Make sure you subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. Anyway, their son, who does this little podcast, decided he'd venture out into bigger territory and he'd try and take on CNN's Scott Jennings. Not a good first move. Just saying. Like, you got your little podcast, okay? You get to go on there and spout all your liberal stuff. Well, now you're in a debate setting, and that's a whole different kind of setting, and you got to be able to fire on all cylinders, buddy boy, in order to do that one. I mean, I know you're cute, and you get really good-looking parents, so you should be cute. But this did not go well. I'm going to show you what happened to the Nepo baby. Oh, now I get it. Nepo baby, right? Who's got a podcast and decided to promote his podcast on CNN. Watch out, buddy.
You cannot put on the American people that Democrats were the one that were hurting people, making this plight.
Who was casting the votes against opening the government? Democrats or Republicans?
Who was
casting the votes?
Scott, who was wanting to cut SNAP benefits?
Nobody.
Republicans
voted to fund
SNAP benefits after 2 courts ruled that it was unallowed.
Republicans voted to fund SNAP 15 times. Democrats voted to defund it 15
and you talk
times.
About the you talk about the Affordable Health Care Act. Okay,
it's terrible.
Landmark legislation is not perfect. We understand that Democrats, Republicans, Independents, 70% of Americans, not Democrats, not just Independents, 70% of Americans believe that they should increase those subsidies past the dead mark of December, the COVID era subsidy benefits. So it's a huge thing that Democrats, Republicans, 70% agree with. And look, when it comes to the government shutdown, I was of the persuasion that to go for it, I didn't really get it. Democrats wanted a fight. They got a fight. Chuck Schumer, back in last year, didn't fight. He got a lot of flack for it, particularly in his home state of New York. So they wanted a fight, but they found a fight that was worth fighting with talking about the Affordable Health Care Act. People were with them. Democrats were leading in the polls. We won big on Tuesday.
That's what it was for, right? It was for the election, right?
Well, I think we should have kept going. What I don't understand, and which I would love others to help me out and understand, I don't understand why we caved so soon when the American people seem to be on our side.
Because the election ended. You just said it. It was for the election.
Listen,
the election ended.
He's like, help me, please, save me from Scott Jennings, who's trying to actually poke a few little holes in my spiel, my little spiel that clearly I don't have down very well. But, it's CNN. I guess he didn't expect that, for goodness sakes. Well, neither did his parents. So the word on the street is they're not too happy. But I would just start with this. You know what? Don't put your kid in the big leagues. Let him go into other happy little places like, doesn't Rachel Maddow have a podcast? Or, better yet, I'm sure Joy Reid would love him. I mean, love him. Okay? Go into friendly territory, for goodness sakes. Don't go up against Scott. Those Republicans, they can be kind of scary for just a kid podcaster, okay? Anyway, unbelievable stuff, guys. Another shout out to our friends over at Balance of Nature. Balance of Nature, one of our great advertisers here on this podcast. I want to make sure that you know about something really important because they have an extra special offer. An extra one for Black Friday, which is kind of great, right? So before I forget, it was supposed to be for Black Friday and the weekend only, but they they've extended it because it's going so well. So go check out balanceofnature.com. Use code word Trish, TRISH. You get a free variety snack pack plus a free preferred customer membership with your first set of Balance of Nature supplements. Go to balanceofnature.com to claim this limited time offer before it ends. It was supposed to end on Monday. So today is Tuesday. I know it's felt like a long week. I mean, when they go after Cash and they go after Pete, all in 48 hours, you're like, wait, it's only Tuesday? And then my heat wasn't on in my studio? My goodness, it's only Tuesday. Look, I like Balance of Nature a lot because I care very much about getting my actual fruits and veggies, right? But I can't possibly cook that much or chop that much. So if you want 31 different fruits and vegetables, direct, this is the way to get it. A wonderful, wonderful supplement. When you turn over the back, you actually understand what's in there. So you get all kinds of ingredients, more fruits and vegetables into my day, thanks to Balance of Nature. I want you to go check them out. Balanceofnature.com. Go get the Black Friday extended deal. Use code word Trish, TRISH. They also, off of the other stuff that they have there, that you can do the 35% off. Remember that one? And free shipping and money back guarantee. So all really good stuff with my code Trish, TRISH. Remember, no binders, no fillers, no flow agents, only the ingredients of 16 whole fruits and 15 whole vegetables in a capsule, freeze-dried, lab-tested, and ready to go where you are ready to go. Another really big story to tell you about, that I have to tell you about, for goodness sakes, where is this in our rundown? Because this is a big, big, big deal. And that is Letitia James and Comey are facing, how shall we say, round two? So round two of indictments. We had talked about this last week, and I told you it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And they're going to go back at her because there's no way that Letitia James is going to get off. There is no statute of limitations. For Comey, I was kind of thinking it might be a little bit more challenging. Because the statute of limitations expired on September 30th of 2025, which is why I was so frustrated, if you were watching the show last week, with one Pam Bondi, because to me this was like, it should not have been missed. There's no way that this one should have been missed, and yet it was. And so now, we're looking at what's coming around, and it seems to me that Tish and Comey are going to be facing quite a problem here, because as I reported just yesterday, and this is, I think, what's scaring so many people, freaking them out, I reported to you that the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, had promised that they were finding a new way to go after James Comey. And that was something that he basically let slip in this little interview that he did with Epic Times. And he said, we're coming, in different ways, and I can't reveal it all. But now CNN is confirming what I told you here on the show yesterday. Let's listen. Okay, so it is not just, ladies and gentlemen, the heat that is misfiring today in the Trish Regan studio, but perhaps the actual system itself.
Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James to a grand jury. According to people familiar with the situation inside the Justice Department, it is expected to happen quickly, perhaps within a week. The court tossed out both the Comey and James cases. The judge found interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan did not have the legal authority of a prosecutor when the two were indicted. Joining us now is Tom Dubois.
Wow. Okay. So remember what Lindsay had discovered, basically a ton of evidence. Remember all this, exhibit after exhibit, both for Letitia and for James Comey. But with James Comey, as I told you, it's really tricky because the way the law works in this case, in Virginia, is that when the statute of limitations is done, it's done. And if you don't have your prosecutor in place before that, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle. In terms of Halligan, whether or not she was legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate prosecutor or not, here's what they had her and the Trump administration on. The way the rules work, Eric Siebert, who was originally in there, and by the way, was like backed by Tim Kaine. Did nobody vet that? Nobody vetted that apparently. So Tim Kaine's choice for prosecution there in Virginia, knowing, of course, that the FBI head is going to be facing some issues, shall we say, that they're pushing this guy. So the guy that's backed by the Democrats, Eric Siebert, he gets the gig. And nobody seems to notice little things like, oh, I don't know, James Comey's son-in-law working in the office with him? I mean, come on. Like, how did you miss that one, Pam? Or anybody else for that matter? It's sort of bizarre to me. So that's when you're just like, what are they doing? I mean, sometimes you just don't need to be smart. You just need to not be stupid. You need to like not dot your I's and, you know, not forget to dot the I's and cross the T's. So in the case of Comey, they get all this great evidence. In the case of Letitia James, they do have a lot of evidence against her in terms of the mortgage fraud allegations. That's all going to go through. We're now hearing they're going to come back for indictment number 2, okay? The indictment number 2 is going to be a little murkier. I'm just going to be honest for Comey, because they're going to say, well, you ran out of time. And I know it's a technicality, which is why it's so darn annoying. But technicalities matter in the law, which is why I keep going back to why did everybody leave this guy in the seat for so long? Now, Letitia, you got no technicalities out there saving your you-know-what. No. Letitia, she's fair game. And Letitia is probably going to have to face the music on this one because, you know, while there's a lot of really good stuff on Comey that they have, and I think he probably is, you know, would have been up a creek without a paddle, they're not going to get there because this guy, Siebert, had no interest in charging him, and nobody did anything about it. And they let him run out the clock. And so then there was no time to get a new prosecutor. So this is, you know, this is the upshot. I mean, in my estimation, Bondi kind of blew it. She botched it. And I know they're coming back with round 2. I don't know as it really gets you anywhere. I really don't know as it gets you anywhere. I do think you got room to go, though, on Letitia, all right? So we learned a lot through Halligan on Letitia, and there is no statute of limitations that is about to expire there. So Letitia is going to face some trouble. The left cannot claim that they've got a victory here yet because there is the appeal on the way and there is an indictment number 2 on the way. Harmeet Dillon over at DOJ writing without prejudice. That's a nod to what the judge had said when they decided that the court could not move forward with those indictments. And they've got all kinds of stuff, right? Mortgage documents where she's basically saying she's going to occupy the property is her principal residence. And then another mortgage document, we've been through this one, the other one that says she's not going to be renting it out. And then if she does have other people living there, it's only going to happen during certain months. Like, oh gosh, look there, down on the right-hand side, February, April, July, September, November. And then it turns out, well, there were a whole bunch of people living there, like year round, right? All the nieces, with all the grandnieces, they were living there. So, Letitia, I don't know what to tell you. I think you are probably, you're done. I was going to use another word, but you're done. And Comey, this is kind of tragic because I think we all believe you. You probably lied to Congress. Remember?
Wow. There's this little thing called tape.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No. I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
And there we have it.
Yeah, there you have it. So I do think that Bondi's going to have some trouble, shall we say. They lost track of time and there was no reason to lose track of time like that. I'm not losing track of time. It is getting late. I want you to make sure you subscribe, share, like, all that stuff. Let me know your thoughts on today's show and those comments made by President Trump, as well as your thoughts on what they're trying to manufacture with Pete Hegseth at this moment in time. Don't forget, I hope you're investing. I hope you're investing for your future. Make sure you go over and you check out my 76 Research, 76research.com. I'm going to put this up on the screen right now. If you use code word dollar, you get the newsletter for $1 a month for the first 2 months. Go ahead and please do that, guys. My gift to you, use code word dollar, and hopefully you're going to start investing, because it's an important time to do that. I'm telling you. He's doing the right stuff. Economically speaking, the right stuff. And this means good things ahead, all right? It really, really does. When it comes to technology, when it comes to new industry, when it comes to even, the manufacturing industry that he's trying to protect right here at home, there's a lot of good things. So I'm very optimistic about the future, which you'll see reflected in this newsletter. Go to 76research.com, use code word dollar, and you know what? I will see you right back here on the show, as always, hopefully a little earlier with a warmer studio tomorrow. See you then.